All right, we'll call to order Safety and Public Works, City of Brainerd. It is 7 p.m., July 1st, 2024, in council chambers. We have 6 items tonight for Safety and Public Works. First of which is considering an ordinance pertaining to homeless encampments and structures. This one, I believe, is Mr. Kramvik.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Community Development Department and Police Department do receive calls each year from concerned residents regarding homeless encampments and structures. The first objective of the Police Department in these situations is to attempt to work with individuals experiencing homelessness and does have a Community Resources Officer available for that help. This has been very successful in finding temporary and permanent shelter for some of the individuals. However, for many different reasons, there are individuals that will not and do not accept help. Our current city code has no provisions that make it illegal to camp on public property. There are within the Parks District curfew that is part of the city code, but not really too enforceable from a police department perspective. So with that, staff has attached a sample ordinance from Rochester for review that prioritizes helping the individual first. But if the non-compliant person does not receive direction from the police department, they could be arrested for a misdemeanor. The sample ordinance has been reviewed by the police department as well as the community development department. Staff believes that a similar ordinance could be beneficial for the community. So with that, staff would like the Safety and Public Works Committee to discuss the issue and give direction to staff. I don't know, John, do you have anything else that you'd like to add to it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So in staff report, I've mentioned before the homeless response team through Crow Wing County Community Services that's been working on this issue. And what we've seen of lately is, as of today, approximately 15 individuals that we will consider homeless that are living in encampments in different locations. Predominantly, the river landing has been the largest encampment area. Over the last couple of weeks, with the river rising and the conditions getting wetter down there, we have seen some of those individuals leave that river basin and have made some attempts within the inner part of the city to set up camp. We've just started seeing that within the last couple of weeks. As of today, I think down in the river landing area, there's maybe only a couple individuals left, maybe even none at this point. So with that, we really don't have any enforcement tools. If we were to, want to regulate and prohibit an encampment developing, in the front yard of City Hall or on road right-of-ways or within the parks, we just don't have the tools within ordinance to do it. So therefore, Rochester earlier this year was in the same position and they adopted an ordinance, and that's kind of what we're bringing to you today as an option.
Thank you. This is a issue that in the last couple of years has become more of an issue. I've received more phone calls and complaints, especially this year. So as this came up, I was happy to see that we have an example to kind of look at. I read through the Rochester ordinance, and it seems pretty solid. Obviously, need to change the name of the city in that ordinance, and you could probably use that ordinance as is. But I did have a question about, I think it's on section 815, is it 4 maybe? Where it says, maybe it's the one above that, sorry. No person may camp in or upon any city land or right-of-way unless otherwise specifically authorized, subject to enforcement requirements in paragraph 815.4 below. So I'm wondering, because if it's just city and not including all other public lands that we have in the city that are either DNR controlled, county, or state, which we do have some of that, could we reword that to just say public land?
Yes, I believe, that would be a good option to include in there.
Okay.
Yep.
Or add or public land.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
That's
that'd
the
be
only
it.
thing that I really noticed in going through it. I don't know if you guys had anything to add.
Yeah, I was thinking like school property and such too. So, I had a question about the encampment. What if somebody was laying on the grass out in Gregory Park and they don't have a tent or any structure? How do we deal with that? Same, I mean, do we have to specifically spell that out, or?
In my mind, and I don't, this is probably better answered by Davis, but in my mind, I'm thinking after 10 o'clock, the park is closed. So is that trespassing or, Chief Davis?
And if I may, so it's prohibiting a campsite, and definition of campsite would obviously include a tent, some other structure, but even as simple as, or any bedding, sleeping bag, or other sleeping matter. So based on their definition, which, we could craft it however we wanted, I think someone laying under a tree, enjoying the sun would not necessarily would not be in violation of this. However, sleeping bags, a bedroll, things that I think a reasonable person would identify as, that next step, could be written in as Rochester did to be prohibited.
Okay.
Answers my question.
Okay.
And I understand the time of the park, but there's other public places that aren't parks that kind of would pertain to that, I guess, so.
Right.
All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Could I add one more thing, if I
Yeah,
may?
go ahead.
One other element in Rochester's is that in order to enforce this during certain hours, there has to be a homeless shelter bed available to that individual. So if there was no shelter beds available, my understanding is this is not enforceable, which would be not the same scenario for us, because, unlike Rochester, we don't have any, 365-day, 7-day-a-week shelters. So that would be, I would see an element of this ordinance that, if written just as Rochester's was, probably wouldn't really fit our situation. So
Right.
then once again, kind of wondering how council would want to
Yeah,
handle that.
I can see how that would cause an issue for the police department, so if we could maybe keep that out of it, just in the fact that there are other places besides shelter beds. A lot of these people have chosen not to couch surf, which was kind of the issue before. But I think there are other options that the police could help with, or that these individuals probably know of, that they would have as an option even if the shelters were closed. Tiffany?
Yeah, so I was also had a question on that, but my understanding is that would have to be in place because of a Supreme Court decision, that they have now made a new decision. And I haven't actually read it, but I think that's probably something that we need to look into and have weighed in on this, because at one point it was that unless they are offered a bed, you can't remove them.
So we're not sure if that.
I think that's been changed.
It has
I'm
been
like
changed, okay.
90% sure that has been changed, but very recently, and we should probably check in on that decision and make sure we're compliant with that decision.
Yep, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
And I'll just, one other thing, I've been in contact with Rochester PD, started some conversations. What have they learned from this? What are some of the takeaways? And for the most part, it's been quite effective. And they're not enforcing it to where they're going out and seeking out every individual and looking in every corner to try and enforce this. They're using this as a tool when they've identified concerns for public safety, quality of life of the residents, nuisance. So, they haven't gone out seeking it, but the tool is there for them when there's an issue compromising some of those things I mentioned.
Yep. I see this solving quite a few issues with public safety, not only with the police officers themselves. You guys now could feel safer enforcing what needs to be enforced, but the individuals that are out there, they've had some safety concerns very recently, and to the point of death with one individual falling into the river. Just today, somebody had a medical event out there. So this is actually using up some of our resources that could otherwise be used in different ways. So I think it's a good move. Any other comments? Motion to direct staff to move forward with crafting this ordinance?
Second.
Oh, I can't make the motion.
So moved, Mike.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
I'd at least get you to smile on that one.
Oh, I smiled, you just didn't see it. Item number 2, we have direction for additional police enforcement for our parks after hours. This kind of goes along with the last one, but this one is for Public Works Director Jesse Dean. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at our last park board meeting, we had several park board members that had commented during their report section regarding receiving reports of activity at the parks after hours. So staff wanted to bring this item to council for just some awareness, and the police department has been pretty instrumental this summer in assisting with some extra enforcement, not only for vandalism and graffiti, but also with additional enforcement for after hours. So we're really requesting the direction for 2 objectives. One is just awareness of the continued issues that we encounter in the city's parks, but also being able to provide some council support for the park board's concerns regarding these issues. And I'll let Chief Davis kind of highlight some of those additional enforcements that we've been doing out in the parks.
Chief?
Thank you. Yeah, this year we've, like most years, we have seeing an increase in some vandalism, graffiti. It's a little bit worse this year than it typically is this time of year. So the month of June, the department's made it a priority. And what that kind of looks like over the last month is police department, we've purchased multiple different cameras and installed them in areas of the city. Some of the cameras are visible. Some of them are not visible to the public, and that's intentional. We have prioritized our targeted enforcement for vandalism, and what that means is during an officer's non-committed time, primarily during the nighttime, their direction is to target vandalism and enforcement, primarily in the park areas. That consists of a lot of foot patrols and some other tools that we have, if you will. We have added quite a few additional overtime shifts, bringing in off-duty staff to work just dedicated to the parks and the enforcement of it. And during the course of, during the month of June, we have had in excess of 40 curfew enforcement actions within the parks and in the city. And in June, we have caught and referred 7 juveniles for criminal damage to property due to the graffiti and the vandalism. 2 of those 7 actually spent some jail time. So, and we are going to be continuing those efforts throughout the summer.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions, comments?
Well, are you looking for a recommendation to have police to spend more time? Because is that not why we were talking about this, or are you just giving us information here?
We're just looking for council support for that continued additional enforcement out in the parks.
You need a motion for that then?
We'd like to see some council action. I think that's what the intention
board
is from the
was
staff
asking
for
for.
giving the council support to the
I
park
think
board
what
as
we
well.
just did in the previous motion might solve a lot of the issues that the park board is looking for, but specifically the other issues that they're looking for is, this continued efforts on fighting vandalism, which our police department has been doing a pretty good job of. Sometimes you whack-a-mole and another one pops up right away. So eventually they're all gone, but
Well, unless you think it's inappropriate, I would move that we
I
continue.
have another question.
Okay.
If you could hold on.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So is there a financial, if we're talking about officers coming in overtime, that makes me think that personnel and finance might need to weigh in on this. Is that something that we need to consider, or are you good with the budget that?
Right now, I am able to continue this,
Okay.
managing my budget that I have. There might be a point where that might need to be a further discussion.
Okay.
We'll see where this goes, and
Okay, then we don't need to talk to personnel and finance. Okay, Jeff.
Well, I was just going to suggest that I'll make a motion that we continue what's the word I'm looking for? To support the police, Brainerd Police Department in its efforts to enhance patrol in our parks.
Second.
excellent. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next is a bid approval for improvement 24-03-2024 large patching project. Public Works Director Jesse Dean, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we received proposals for our large patching project for the year. We had several patches on Northtown Street and Clara Street. We have $50,000 budgeted for this year. The two bids are attached. The low bid was from Anderson Brothers in the amount of $47,950. We are also recommending that some patching work is completed in Southwest 4th Street, kind of nearby the recent repairs that we did on the outfall. If we have any remaining funds available, if we're able to use the remaining budget. We're recommending award of the large patching project to Anderson Brothers in the amount of $47,950, and then to further authorize staff to work with Anderson Brothers to complete some additional patching on Southwest 4th Street, not to exceed the total budgeted amount of $50,000.
Chair?
Yeah, Jeff.
So there's $47,950, so we have a $2,050 of additional work that we might want to negotiate they do for us. But what if we look and it says, well, we need $2,500 worth to really make it a good job on that additional work? Are we just going to say no, stick to the $2,050 that we have remaining?
They're usually pretty good about working with us and getting what we completed. If it's going to be quite a bit more, then yes, we would probably just leave it out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion?
I'll move to approve this request, or the bid from Anderson Brothers.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 4, we have an informational, I believe it's informational, item on locations of annexation requirements for water and sewer connection. Again, this is Public Works Director Jesse Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the last meeting, we were requested to provide some information on areas where we have requirements of annexation before connection to city water and sewer. So we had a few different documents that we included in the packet for the council to see. So first was a resolution that detailed the 4 different projects that we have associated connection charges. So those 4 projects are Riverside Drive, Beaver Dam Road, Wonderland Park Road, and Oak Street. So those just detailed the ones that have connection charges. Second is the policy that was adopted in 2003. We have referenced this recently in council meetings, most specifically for Riverside Drive. The policy doesn't reference specific projects. It's actually general in nature. It actually applies to any connection to utilities outside city limits. But it does talk about in that policy that there is a requirement for annexation that any property owner who receives municipal utilities must sign an agreement that a petition for annexation into the city for the property will be submitted as soon as practicable pursuant to the appropriate statute or risk disconnection of service. So there is, that policy does cover where that requirement is for people to petition to annex into the city before they're able to connect. There is one challenge to that. If they're not adjoining the existing municipal boundary, they aren't able to actually annex into the city with that. And then lastly is the current street and sewer assessment policy. So with specific attention to Section 2, this talks a little bit about the how we install municipal utilities. So this says that from here on in, the city's not going to install municipal utilities until those properties are annexed, and then those costs for installation are then assessed to the properties accordingly. It does reference the previous practice of imposing connection charges on properties that aren't within the city limits, and that once they make the connection, those costs become due, or if they divide the property, those costs are due. So those are the 4 those 3 documents I thought that were most pertaining to the question regarding the policy, as well as the projects that were most relatable. So that was more of the information that staff was able to find on those projects regarding connection. But again, that policy was more general in nature, so it kind of applies to anybody that is outside city limits that would have an ability to connect into the city's water and sewer system.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So, is the hang-up really properties that are not, that are able to connect to city water and sewer, but they're not, don't have a boundary with the city? Is that possible, or does this prevent that? Or am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
So generally, there's not a lot of properties that don't abut the city municipal boundary that have access to the city water and sewer system. There might be a one-off situation that could be possible. It's tough to say right off the top of my head if there's a parcel out there, but yes, it's possible. I'm thinking somebody that would want to do a really long run to make that connection, but yes, it would be possible for somebody that would want to do that, but in general, no. We would say that most people to make that connection would want to have to annex in if they are able to.
Okay, so, and the reason I'm asking, because you mentioned it, and it didn't seem like it was feasible, you wouldn't have mentioned it, but are you looking for us to just kind of get these policies back so they all align, so there's no confusion? Is that what or is it just information tonight?
So this is just information that was requested at the last meeting. I did reference it in the alternative section that it's our recommendation that these requirements are better reflected in city code as part of the water system section. BPU is also looking at the water system section to do some updates to that section. We think that this would be a better place to have that requirement reflected because that's something that would be very enforceable from the city standpoint. So that would be our recommendation.
So
is
if you're
that
recommending that, you're looking for action from us?
not at this time.
Not at this time, okay,
Not at this time.
okay.
Okay, Jesse, I'll probably throw this one back to you just because you're gonna run through it without your head exploding like mine would in going through these. But there might be other questions from the rest of the council at that time, so I'll probably hand this one back to you if that's all right.
Sure.
Anything else, guys? All right, moving on. Item number 5, we have action on, or direction on active code enforcement cases. Again, this is James Kramvik.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff is bringing 3 properties for consideration tonight. The first property is 319 9th Street North. So this property is a repeat offender. We typically don't hear anything from this property. This property did have a fire, I want to say a month or 2 ago, and we're working through that process. They have received notice of violation letters for the junk and debris that's outside, which is really a lot of the leftover fire stuff that's out there. And they've also been receiving citations for grass and weeds. Because some of the fire debris can be hazardous materials, hazardous building materials and such, staff is recommending ahead of the $600 citation amount to abate the junk and debris and grass at this property because of the potential for hazardous materials.
Okay. Anything on the other ones?
So yep, so the other one's 401 4th Avenue Northeast. So this one is a violation for junk and debris, and then as well as for an unlicensed and inoperable vehicle. Staff recommends obtaining a search warrant to abate the junk and debris and unlicensed vehicle. Notice in the picture various wood scrap piles and various other types of junk and debris found at the property, and then the unlicensed vehicle. That's been kind of standard practice of the recommendations. And the last property is 408 2nd Avenue Northeast. This is another one that would most likely be on our vacant building registry. Nobody lives at this property. We haven't heard from them. We did end up mowing the grass at this property as well as taking down some of the weeds that are in the backyard. Neighbor has complained about the weeds that are coming from the backyard. It's actually called Japanese knotweed that looks like bamboo. This is kind of found all throughout Brainerd. It was planted originally as an ornamental, but is considered a noxious weed within our city code. So with that, staff is recommending obtaining a search warrant to abate and spray the noxious weed. After it's cut down, the easiest time to spray would be when it just starts to regrow.
Thank you. That's all of them?
That is all of them. I can answer any questions.
Is there questions or a motion?
I move that we proceed with staff's recommendations.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 6, we have notification of a CRP grant award for the Trunk Highway 210 Lum Park Pedestrian Bridge. Public Works Director Jesse Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So very, very good news that we found out this last Tuesday. We received our first grant award for the Lum Park Highway 210 pedestrian bridge and trail. We received little over $1.3 million towards that project. A chunk of it, about $1.25 million, was in for fiscal 2025, and then a little sliver of it was in 2026. Included the award letter in the item. So it's kind of a short timeline that we would have to expend the funds, but still very, very good news for us to be able to get that first award. We still do have some other partners that potentially would be able to pitch in and stuff like that. As a just quick reminder, the overall project was potentially upwards of $6 million in total costs. So we do need to continue to find some other sources of funding. It is state aid eligible. We do have some work to do to find out some more funds beyond just our state aid, but we're going to continue to work on that process. Like I said, previously, the DNR has been a support of the project, and we'll see if there's the potential for them to help assist with some of the funding. But we'll continue to work on that process. But very good news for us to receive that first grant for that project. Because of the short term, we'll have to make some decisions here relatively shortly because of the process with the federal project. There is a lot of things that we have to do in the process before we can award the project. And that does take some time. So we'll have to make some decisions whether or not to start that process relatively soon. But hopefully I'll have some more information here in an upcoming meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Chesak.
Jesse, what has the city spent so far on this project?
Roughly about $35,000 in the feasibility study, plus about another $10,000 towards some of the grant funding or grant applications.
Okay. And then can this be used for engineering or design or anything like that? It's just 1 point whatever million it is?
I believe, no, this would not be eligible towards engineering, but likely it would be going towards the $5 million-ish of expected construction costs.
So it's kind of on a hope and a prayer we come up with a significant number of dollars to help support this beyond the 1.5 we received, right?
We would likely need to get some more supplemental funding beyond the 1.3. Yep.
Okay. And then, I mean, it's, do we have to have something active before this term ends? Or, I mean, do we wait till the last minute and then, I guess that, there's a deadline before we have to use it, and if we don't, it's gone.
We have to award a contract. It has to be awarded before the end of fiscal year 2025, MnDOT fiscal year 2025. If we don't award a contract, it doesn't have to be necessarily constructed, but has to be awarded and encumbered by that time. Otherwise, the funds turn back.
Fiscal year ends when?
I'd have to double check on the exact year or the date if they're going to work on calendar year or MnDOT year. State.
Okay.
Tiffany?
So I'm part of the ATP, and I was pretty excited when this came up, and we finally got some dollars. So I'm kind of hoping it's a domino effect, and we start getting more. There were concerns about getting it, whether we could get it done in time, and it is also it's a very new program. They're still trying to figure out exactly what it can be used for, and some of the other projects were roundabouts, and there was one other trail project that was approved for this carbon reduction program.
Excellent. That was just informational, so no motion needed at this time. Unless there's any more discussion, we can reconvene at the council meeting.
In a minute and a half.